Doc B. I'll call you Doc B for this. Dr. Bhattacharya is born in England. His father was Indian, and that's how he gets a very Indian name. Still very patriarch, I have to say. And his mother is from London. He's very driven and motivated. We will talk a lot about that because he is that person who also brings it, that motivation in his work. And I'm going to really probe into it because every one of us needs it, and we will find out the mantra behind it. Of course, not only that he is a practitioner, a doctor, and really curates people's lives to be in a happy space. But what really excites me is that he uses the word empathy. And he runs a clinic called the Empathy Clinic. Very unlikely in the medical profession that one hears this term, but of course, very, very intrigued to know more about that, Dr. B. And not only that, but of course, a lot of music that he blends with his profession. On the other side, not that he blends it, but just that he also has a lot of music in his life that makes him a very interesting doctor to be. So, Dr. B, welcome. This is a Second Act podcast, a place where we take out everything, that you have another potential, another drive, another purpose in life. And maybe I'm hoping that somebody who hears a conversation is able to take out something that will really bring in a purpose in their life. So I know.
So, Acharya, first of all, thank you so much for reaching out. We don't know each other yet, but we will, don't worry. And I want to make a comment on the name of your show, Second Act, because I think my entire life has been a second act.
Wow.
I was born in one country, moved to another country. My career has always been a second act. I'm always looking to move my career to new places, which would be a second, third, fourth, and fifth act. I've also acted and danced on the stage. I have a classical ballet background, so I'm very comfortable on the stage. But I'm also a complete introvert. So it's just an interesting juxtaposition of seconds and acting and my second act. So when I saw the name of your show, I got so excited because it's actually who I am. I am a second act.
Wow. This I didn't know will blend so well. And thank you for acknowledging that, it really, I think it brings in so much inspiration to me every day. When I say this name itself, even if in a dull day I say second act, it brings a spark in my life. So yes.
Something that makes us uniquely human is hope. It's very hard to see hope in other creatures. I know they have it. I know a tree has hope that it can grow again when it's chopped down, but I think human beings practice hope. And something that is so profound when it comes to hope is that when we lose something or something is taken away from us, there's always a second chance or a second act that we can follow. And that's why your title is so powerful, because it's a hopeful title. It's not just a phrase, it's talking about hope.
I'm going to use that one, Dr. B, in one of my
Absolutely, it's yours. I'm giving it to you right now.
Thank you so much. This is a great one to introduce it, actually. I never thought of it that way. It just gives me a lot of motivation to be, So yeah, so thank you for that. Starting with knowing a little bit more about you and the work that you do. It's a very obvious question, and I'm sure that a lot of people have asked you this or in a conversation that how do you keep yourself disconnected from so much which is going on when people come to you and consult you and your life itself? Do you, are you able to keep it separate? Does it impact you as a psychiatrist yourself?
Well, unfortunately, I'm a bit of a sponge emotionally. So I tend to soak things in, which is why I need to squeeze that sponge regularly. So I don't end up being a damp sponge. And the way I squeeze that sponge regularly is I exercise a lot. That's what all my music is about. It's so different from being a doctor to be playing or writing or recording or on a stage performing. And that squeezes that sponge so that next time in front of my clients, I'm dry again and I can absorb what I need to absorb. I think when we talk about empathy, we're talking about absorbing. And when we absorb, that can fill us up. And if we get too full, then we can get overwhelmed. If we get overwhelmed, we can try and push harder to try and keep up with that. And that causes something called burnout. And burnout is something I'm very keen on talking about in platforms. But the problem with burnout is that people don't like talking about it because they feel ashamed. So I realized very early in my career that I didn't want to get too overwhelmed. I didn't want to get burnt out. I didn't want to get ashamed of not being able to keep up with all this stuff. And this is why I've got so many second acts on the go in my life, to keep me fresh when I'm in the moment with my clients, but also to keep me fresh when I'm in the moment with my relationships, my friendships, and with my marriage and with my children, so that I can be that optimistic and that hopeful person, and hopefully that will inspire that for other people.
Yes, I think more than anything, I think it's the profession that you chose. So I want to go back to ask you, you wrote that, it was something that you always wanted to be. Are we coming from a space that, you got inspired from? Did you want to just cure the world? So what were the thoughts when you were younger?
So I had a leg problem when I was 6.
Okay.
And this is in England. And I had to be in the hospital for 3 months. And then for about a year and a half after that, so almost 2 years for the whole thing, I had to have a lot of metal equipment on my legs.
Wow.
Now, I wanted to be a soccer player and play with all my friends on the field.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened is I couldn't be with my male friends on the field. I got stuck with all the girls. Mm-hmm. Because I was able to stand still and hold the rope and help them play skipping rope. And I realized girls are cool. They like to talk about how they think and feel. They like to talk about empathy. They like to share stories, and they're actually what holds communities together. The guys are just running around thumping each other, kicking this ball. So I learned very early that listening and reflecting and thinking about what, in those days, what all the girls were talking about, was a way cooler place for me than to be running around on a soccer field kicking a ball, which has value too. I'm not dissing that at all. But so from a very early age, I was that guy at recess that kids would come and talk to. And then eventually they would come and talk about their problems. And then I realized, wait a minute, I could have a career doing this. And so it just fits who I am, the introvert, listening, reflecting, and listening to the amazing way that the girls talk to each other and how different it was from the way the boys talk to each other. That's where it all started.
Wow. I'm listening beyond what you're saying. Not every boy realizes that, and I'm so glad that you did it, and that too at a very early age. So, I mean, empathy is something, at least in my corporate career, I started hearing about it, let's say 6 or 7 years ago. This term, I did not think that had any relevance, especially in, corporate world. But suddenly everybody's talking about empathy. But of course, one is that we are talking about it, and one is that we are being empathetic. So do you train people to be empathetic, or are you empathetic to them? How does it work?
Well, empathy actually isn't a one-way street. It's a two-way street.
Yeah.
And so when we introduce ourselves to someone, we begin to get to know them. We want that person to experience how we feel in our life. We want to experience how we feel in our life on the inside. And hopefully that person wants us to be experiencing them. Now, let me give you a little example that's auditory. You ready?
Yeah.
So later on, when we're listening to the show, my voice is not going to sound to me the way it sounds to me right now on the recording. Mm-hmm. If you ever notice, we don't sound the way we sound to ourselves when we listen to ourselves back on a recording.
Right.
Now, the reason for that is that when we're speaking into a tape recorder or a machine, our voice is coming from our mouth going right into the machine. When we're speaking in our inner voice, it's coming here, but it's also coming through our body. Mm-hmm. And if you put your fingers in your ears, you can still hear your voice, because that's the resonance that's happening in your body. So for me, empathy is trying to listen to the way someone's voice sounds to them. Oh. And that's, I know that's impossible, but I think that's the effort. And so once you start to get interested in how someone else is experiencing themselves, if I say to you, no, that's China, that's the way you sound, you can say, no, that's not the way I sound to me. But no, that's the way you sound to me. That's not empathizing. That's just pointing out the fact of how we sound on a tape recorder. But if I try to understand how you sound to you, And that goes to sound, feelings, emotions, wishes, fantasies. And that's what I do in my office. I try to enter the world of that other person to find out how they experience themselves. And once I start doing that, that makes a huge difference on how they feel understood.
Wow, that's very powerful. So, people who are hearing us, and we need it really a lot in our life right now to be empathetic. What can I learn from you right now if I have to? What do I do in my life to understand somebody and make them feel understood?
Well, again, I wouldn't use the word make. I would
Okay.
use the word try, because I think
All
when
right.
we talk about empathy, it's quite soft. Empathy is quite a soft experience. There's no hardness to empathy. And we can talk about kindness and compassion if we have time later on. But for me, empathy is mostly a passive experience. In other words, if I ask you a question, I have to listen. And while I'm listening, if I'm thinking about all the amazing things I'm going to be saying while you're talking, I'm no longer listening.
Oh yeah.
I'm actually just hearing myself, and I'm trying. Your words are coming beside what I'm. So you really have to clear your mind and stop thinking about your thoughts when you're really listening. And when you're really listening, and what I do is I actually try to build a movie of what the person's telling me in my mind. So and now I'm kind of like on the scene watching their movie, the sights, the sounds, the smells, and that's how I come up with the questions, because I might noticing something's missing. So I'll ask, so where was your friend during that time? Oh, right. And that means that I'm completely ignoring my mental state at that time. And I'm just trying to enter the mental state of the other person. And that's called active listening and also active imagining. And that's what I do for empathy. And that's very hard to do. You have to practice it, because most people can only listen for about 15 seconds before they get bored.
So, do you do a private practice, or are you empaneled with a hospital? How do you normally get to people?
Well, no, I don't. I've never worked in a hospital. I only have worked in a private practice. People get sent to me because they know how I work.
Okay.
And I'm extremely busy, of course, but also what I do takes time.
Yes.
You can't really have an enduring therapy experience with someone in 5 minutes. It's going to take a little bit longer than that. And there's a lot of issues around, especially if I'm working with people with post-traumatic stress disorder, especially from childhood abuse, when you need to be very careful, and you need to create a safe environment before, and an empathic environment. But you just can't start resonating empathy with someone unless you've created a safe place for them. And what's happened to me over the years is that I get referred mostly specifically for what I do. My empathy approach is, people sort of know it now. And it's very different from going to see, for example, a psychiatrist who will get you to fill out a few forms and then look at the checklist and then say you have this diagnosis and then give you some medications and say we'll see you in 6 months, which is fine. That's a perfectly reasonable form of care as well, but that's not really how I practice. I really want to get to know the person as well as their illness. Their illness is important, but the person where that illness is inside is even more important.
So maybe a little offbeat kind of a question, but like I'm talking from a person who would want to ask this. So when you talk about the post-trauma or the post-stress, when you're dealing with young adults, how you choose your words these days, because I do not know if I knew this word, either stress or depression or trauma, so much as my kids do today. They're very well aware. And they also know that, when they need therapy, when they don't, it's a very, I think it's a very great movement towards knowing yourself and being aware of your feelings now, which I think I completely missed out. And I think you would also realize that we didn't have a chance. So how do you deal with younger children these days? Because you have to be so careful as parents, and I don't have a background to deal in a certain way.
But I think that we have to realize that young children are people too. The only thing is they don't have the horizon of experience or wisdom to be able to compare now to their future. So if a kid gets caught stealing something in a grocery store, they might think their life is over, because they can't make those same kind of measurements. They don't know how long it's going to take to drive somewhere if they're that young. So I think what you have to be careful is that the measurements when we're younger are very different than when we get older. When you're a kid, it takes forever for your school semester to be over. And when you become an adult, everything happens in the blink of an eye. Time seems to go faster when we're older. So this is important to know. Whether we're talking to children, teenagers, or adults, my approach is always the same. And that is that create a safe environment, make sure the person feels safe where possible. And if you have questions, ask them as clearly as you can, and prove to them that you're listening. And you prove to them that you're listening by saying, thank you for telling me that. I'd like to just summarize what I think you told me. Is this what you told me? And tell them what you told them. Did I miss anything out? And they'll let you know or not. And as you do that, and you can prove to them, you're really taking them in. Most people will tell you almost anything you ask them, whether they're teenagers or adults. And I'm shocked how many people tell me things that they've never told anyone ever before. And it's not because there's any magic. I'm not a special person. But I make the experience feel special to that person because I make them believe where possible. I'm using make now, and I said not to you, but I'm allowing them to believe that they're in a safe place, and whatever they tell me is going to be treated with respect, consideration, and hopefully hope, where they too in their life can have a second act instead of the one they've been doing their whole life.
Yeah. Yay. That's great. Okay. Thank you. You wrote 2 books. One of them is on relationships. So why did you choose this topic?
Well, unfortunately, after 28 years of marriage, my parents got divorced. And it was the same time I got into medical school. And it was a very shameful and embarrassing experience. And my parents are good people, and I had a good upbringing, but they got divorced because they just lost that connection with each other. And I got married fairly early in life and started raising my family, and I got really, really interested in what are the key ingredients of keeping a relationship together, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's with our friendships, whether it's in our marriages, or with our children when we become parents. And I began to realize more and more what causes people to get alienated from each other is they don't align with each other enough. They just kind of drift apart. And if people meet and get married early, they may just kind of just drift apart over time because that's what happens. And one of my goals, especially in I've been married for 35 years, one of my goals is to always align with my partner, to make sure that we're possible. That if we're allowed to have different interests, but we have to know where we're at. And when we know where we're at, we can align each other to us ultimately to support each other. And if that keeps going and there's a genuine interest in each other, that's a much greater chance of making sure that our love and our respect and our admiration and our support for each other is maintained, whether that's in my friendships or in a marriage or in my work, for example. And so I began wondering what causes people to drift apart like that. And that's why I wrote my book.
So when you talk about alignment, what is that alignment? How do I bring? So sometimes your alignment is not matching despite your best intention, because you're 2 different people, you think differently. Now I'm also in the 26th year of my marriage. I see there are lots of things that we have come together, but there are some things that we just don't agree on sometimes. And then we just say, okay, am I drifting apart? So what is this alignment and how do I bring it into my life?
So marriage, if we're going to talk about marriage in India versus Canada, I mean, the divorce rate in India is incredibly low. And the divorce rate in Canada is around 50%. Yeah. So it's almost a flip of a coin. Marriage is an agreement to be someone's companion until you die. And it doesn't mean you have to agree on everything. It doesn't mean that you need to get along all the time. It doesn't mean that you're not allowed to fight. But it's a fundamental agreement to be together and to support each other where possible. You don't have to agree, and you can fight, but it's an agreement to be that person's companion for the rest of your life. And I think it's a wonderful arrangement in part because that's what communities are. Communities are groups of families. That's what society is, which is groups of communities. And if we all let it crumble, then the basis of our connections is also going to crumble. And I'm not threatening. I just think that's an outcome. So I think it's really useful to know how to maintain a relationship with someone. Even if you don't get along, or if you're going through a rough patch, I think marriage is an agreement on physical reasons, so that that's your physical partner for the rest of your life, but also emotional reasons. And that doesn't mean you can't have friendships outside of the marriage with people of the opposite sex, for example, but it means that you have to have boundaries. You have to have boundaries that so that your marriage is a place of safety and sanctity, and there are boundaries around it. And what happens, especially in Canada, is that people get bored. People just want more. They want a fresh experience. They want dare I say it, a second act. And that's one thing that marriage isn't. Marriage is not, hopefully, is not a setup to need to have a second act. It's hopefully it's the first act, and I know that that's somewhat unrealistic. That not all people can, and maybe not all people should stay in it, especially if they are in a bad marriage. But the idea is to generally agree, irrespective of those moments when you're having a rough patch.
Yeah, and so, yeah, I want to read this book, of course, and to understand what we can do to align better. And the rest 25 years will be then a smooth. So what is your second book about?
Well, my second book is a novel, and I started to notice a lot of my friends who I graduated from medical school back in 1984 were starting to retire, and we're retiring from burnout. Oh. And so I started thinking, I'm not burnt out. I really love my job, and I love life. I love my marriage and my kids. And why are they getting burnt out? And I've been burnt out a few times in my career as well. So I know I have some experience for what that feels like. But I wrote a book about a psychiatrist who burns out. It's written like a movie, and I wanted to kind of bury or embed the themes of burnout in a novel format, so that people wouldn't necessarily have to read a self-help book about burnout. It will be a story that anyone could relate to. Yeah. But the problem with burnout, and so that's called Deep Fried Nerves is the book. But the problem with burnout is a lot of professionals are ashamed, and their shame keeps them silent, and that silence allows their burnout to fester and grow until sometimes they might have a breakdown. And so I think we're at almost pandemic levels of burnout in North America. Especially in healthcare, especially in medicine. So I think it's a bit of a difficult situation, because I'm trying to say, let's not be ashamed, but people are often ashamed, don't want to talk or admit that they're burnt out, and so they keep going until snap, something cracks, or they start retiring. So I think it's a big problem, but I wrote it as a novel to again, in my usual way, to have a softer approach, to ring some alarm bells about burnout in our culture.
Yeah, I think it's very important. And also because at this time of our life, in the last 2.5 years, I think not only burnout, in emotionally, but I think in every which way, we were not able to do even, physical practices, fitness practices, even if, like, I'm such a yoga person, but I used to get up at 4:30 in the morning. And during the last 2 years, I've seen my, the alarm bell going, and like I'm switching it off, and then I'm saying, okay, I'm going to get up, and like the energy levels are dropping despite everything else. And I'm feeling the change in my own self, and I'm sure that a lot of young people too. So what is the thing that we can all do to be in a good balance of, because times are challenging and it's not easy for anyone. What do you recommend as a doctor?
Well, as a person, maybe not so much as a doctor,
Okay.
as a person, I think there's physical, I think there's emotional or mental, I think there's social, and I think there's spiritual. So for me, those are the ingredients that I'm constantly trying to maintain and preserve so that I feel physically capable, mentally capable, socially capable, and spiritually capable to do what I do, which includes my marriage and my relationships with all my friends and family, and of course, my work. So I have to show up looking as if I'm okay. And I don't just have to be okay, I have to be able to be a role model for okay and inspire other people to have that okay as well. I mean, if I come on looking kind of just really, really down, it's very hard to inspire people who have anxiety problems or trauma or depression if I look like I'm not coping with myself. So I'm not acting it. I actually do feel okay. And then more than okay. And so practicing those things, especially the spiritual, I think it's really important to listen to how you feel on the inside. Whether you use meditation or various or yoga is fantastic, of course, or various physical techniques, to listen to how you feel on the inside, because we're born with the capacity to read ourselves. You know how you have an engine light in your car? And if your car is a little bit, and this little light will flash, well, I think we have engine lights inside us. And if we really pay attention and we can see them saying, you're okay today. You can see them saying, I just want to hit that snooze button one more time. I'm just not feeling the energy. Be kind to yourself, which means some days you will get a day when you don't feel like doing something. That's okay. We need 0 days and we need days when we're very active. But I think the whole idea of keeping that in a balance with our physical, mental, social, spiritual selves, for me, is the way to maintain it. And if you think about it, our brain has a thinking cortex, an emotional cortex, a motor cortex, and a balance cortex, right? So our brain is set up to keep those things all in check as well. And we need our bodies for our brain to work properly, and we need our brain for our body to work properly. That's why we need to have that integration with the physicality and the mentality. And I know sometimes if I'm really struggling with a problem and I can't figure it out, if I go for a run or a bike ride or a good walk, invariably, I'm 5% smarter because I've cleared my mind and I've got access to my thoughts again. And that happens most of the time. And I think as long as we keep doing that, that balance will be ours.
Okay, so you wrote about mental health, of course, in specific, and you also mentioned kindness and compassion. And you also mentioned that be kind to yourself. It's good to hear them. When you read it, you feel, yeah, I need to do it. But how do I make it a habit, or how do I inculcate in me? Because it's not in my DNA to be kind to me. I'm always like, okay, I haven't done this. I'm always in a guilt mode. And I'm always like one short of myself. So,
so if you want to make a habit of smoking,
right.
All you have to do is start smoking cigarettes. And with about a week, you're going to start craving cigarettes. Now you have a habit. Now let's run the other way. If you want to make a habit of breath work, if you take a deep breath in and just do your breath work, if you do yoga or any kind of technique, that is inhaling, so is smoking, but breath work is a fabulous habit to develop.
Right.
Now, smoking will make you feel terrible when you start, and eventually you'll be addicted, so you feel good when you have a cigarette. That's the bad habit. But breath work and learning to calm your soul and your mind and your heart is a good habit. And the reward for a habit is to feel good about yourself. And what people often have trouble with is, I want to start a good habit, but it's going to take time. I have to get up. I have to go to whatever they're doing. But the reward for a good habit happens over here. It may not happen right away. And unfortunately, we live in a time when people want a reward very quickly.
Right.
They want to be able to have a drink and feel good very quickly. They want, or a cigarette, or get a text from somebody very quickly. But the way our reward systems work is that we get more achieved in the long run if we can have a wish here and have a reward just a little bit in the future. And if you keep practicing that, we can learn how to stretch that out so that we can set a goal that we might not achieve for many years, but we'll achieve it. And the more we achieve our goals, the more we look forward to long-term rewards, the more confident we can feel that we can do that. And that can build really, really good habits on a daily basis.
Did you see any transition in the last 2.5 years versus the kind of work that you were getting before? Did you see that there was more pain, there was more people reaching out to you? And did you transition also in your life?
Are we talking about the effect of the pandemic on my practice?
Yes.
Well, I'm just going to hold up this mug here. Okay. And it says, I love telemedicine. And I use a program called Doxy, which is actually a 100% virtual program. So what's happened to me is I went from an inpatient practice in an office overnight to 100% using a virtual platform online. No training. We just had to jump immediately to that. But what I've noticed is that working on an online platform has actually been more efficient and effective. It's easier for me to deliver the care that I do. It's easier for my clients as well. A lot of them are getting better faster, so I can see more people ultimately. And I think it fits me better to be working on this particular platform. So the transition for me was initially very scary. I thought, well, what am I going to do? I've been in an office for 35 years, and now I've got to be on a television screen. But when I actually got into it, I said, this fits me perfectly. You know, I don't mind speaking. I don't mind performing. I don't mind being on camera. I never have been. And you know, my clients are comfortable too. They're often in a comfortable place. We can get into our session right away and we can get a lot done. So for me, I think it's been a huge surprise, but a wonderful transition.
But did your calls increase, or did people who wanted to reach you increase in the last 2.5 years?
Well, the answer is really, I'm not that sure, because I've always been extremely busy. There's a long waiting list to see me. I've been full ever since I started. And so am I full? You know, basically, if I fill this cup up to full and I keep filling it, it's just going to spill over. So my cup has been full really for 35 years as far as my practice is concerned. So if I get 10 calls a week or 20 calls a week, I can only really see so many people. So I think initially I thought there's going to be a lot of people calling around pandemic issues, but actually that's not been the case. Most people are calling because of relationship issues, what's happening in their relationships. And that might be certainly related to the pandemic, but it's much more the human issues that I've been dealing with for most of my career.
Yeah. I think we've spent a lot of time together also sitting at home. I don't blame people that, either it's gone really closer or then it is not working out. I think that's
right.
The two sides of the coin. Yeah. So how did the passion for music come into all this? How did you manage time? Because when you're studying medicine, there is no time that I know. So.
Well, that's actually not true. When you're studying medicine, maybe it's the way my brain works. But if you learn something, the way your brain learns things is you learn something and you store it, and then your brain needs to do something else. And you can either sleep or you can either exercise. Let me just use my pointer here. You can use your left brain and then you can use your right brain. And so music is more of a right brain thing, and being a doctor is a left brain thing. Now, if you're doing this all the time, you're strengthening both sides. So imagine if I start exercising my right arm all the time and I ignore my left arm. Not only am I going to be lopsided and look weird, but this arm is actually going to get weaker because I'm always using it, and this one's going to get weaker because I'm not using it. So if I use this one some of the time and this one some of the time, I'm going to be stronger all over. The brain is the same thing. It's really useful to exercise one side and the other side to give it a break. And I got involved in music when I was 15 in 1975. Yeah. Largely to do with what was going on in my family. It was a bit dysfunctional. So I found that I could spend many hours in my room practicing my guitars and playing. And then eventually, when my parents broke up, to make money, the only way I could support myself was playing in a rock band. And so I had to bring all my books to the show. When I got off the stage, I'd run off to the corner, study my books, and then for half an hour, I'd get back on the stage again and start playing again, get up and read my books. And And I just got used to it. I missed out on all the socializing in the medical school because of that. That was a downside to that. But obviously I made it through. I did extremely well in anything to do with psychiatry. So I knew that was always going to be my thing. But for me, music also is a really good way to cleanse my mind and squeeze that sponge, as I said earlier. And I think better because of how much I invest in my music. And I practice an hour or 2 hours every day, and I record music and have a recording studio.
Yeah. I also observed that, of course, you're putting some videos on LinkedIn, and I have only noticed you through LinkedIn. I want to appreciate that. I find you very authentic. I find you vulnerable. I find you the person that you are. And that's why I reached out to you to say that share your story, please, because I'm sure that there are many out there we are all trying to put a brave face to ourselves. We don't want to show the world that we are breaking down sometimes, and what's happening inside us. So thanks for sharing that. Thanks for really bringing the both sides to us so that we can see you clearly. So that is something I really appreciate. And how do you feel about being on LinkedIn, and this is something new that you are also doing, reaching out through LinkedIn?
Well, it wasn't me, it was my daughter. My daughter was visiting us from Italy, where she lives. And she said, Dad, you need to get on LinkedIn and you need to put out some videos. So I started a little bit, very, very cautiously, thinking, I'm a doctor, I'm a professional, I'm a psychiatrist, what is this? And I very quickly realized that LinkedIn had changed, that it actually was quite ready for someone who has some of the comments and ideas that I have. And so for me, it's been a platform to be me and express both sides of me, or many sides of me, in a way that shows precisely what you're saying, that I'm a human being first. I'm a doctor as well, but I'm also a person who values family and friendships and empathy, compassion, love, and kindness. And I think these are messages that are so, so, so important. And I mean, if I came onto your show with a white coat and a stethoscope and said, well, we're going to be,
Yeah.
it just, I could do that. I could also turn up on a show with a screaming guitar and just be playing lead guitar and singing and screaming. And, but I think who I am really is just a reflection of what's in here, however it comes out. And I think my clients notice that. I think my audience notices that. That's the way I write. And there is really only one me. And if I start acting like a way that I'm really not, I think that's not a second act I want to have. I want my second act to be every new incarnation of an improved version of myself.
Beautiful. Yes, that's what I wanted to hear, a better version of myself. So before you go, I have 2 or 3 very quick questions for you. How do I keep myself motivated every single day of my life?
Well, you don't have to be motivated every day. You have to be motivated some days. And I think if you try to get motivated every day, you're going to experience disappointment and failure, and that's going to take away from your motivation. So don't set yourself up to fail. The best way to be motivated is to set a little tiny task that you do on a regular basis, and then set bigger tasks with bigger rewards. Motivation is something you can actually practice. And I start my day with push-ups, for example. So I'll do 40 push-ups every morning. And who wants to do push-ups as soon as they wake up?
Yeah.
No, but you know what it does? It pumps a lot of blood to my brain, so that by the time I see my first client, especially if it's a cold morning, I'm warm, and my brain is flush with fresh blood, and it works every single time. And it's a little thing, but the rewards that you get from something that motivates you is what keeps you and what makes you more motivated in the long run.
I love your answer, to be honest. And I really did not know that one doesn't have to keep yourself motivated every single day. And I hear you when you say that is taking yourself to failure, to be honest, because then there will be days when you're not, and then you'll say, oh my goodness, I can't do it anymore. And, you'll be disappointed with your own self. So thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's got me to think it's okay not to be okay.
It's okay. It's okay to be who we are. Human beings are human.
Yeah.
right? Which means that we're essentially imperfect. So the perfect human is actually essentially imperfect. And when you embrace that and love that and give support to that, you can tolerate things that disappoint you, and you can tolerate things that upset you, because you know, because of hope, that you're always going to get a chance for a second act or a second opportunity. And that's how we're built. You know, we try and try and try. All the stuff that we have wasn't invented in a few days. You know, it took us many, many years to invent language. Do you realize that we've been on the planet for 300,000 years, but we only started using language 50,000 years ago? That means for 250,000 years, we were not speaking. It took us 250,000 years to learn how to speak. And in the last couple of hundred years, we've got so many things around us, like cell phones and all the rest of it, that we invented. But for me, I think give yourself the time you need to invent the new you.
Yeah, thank you. And if you are not practicing, you're not exercising, you are not playing music, what are you doing?
Well, I like to write, you know, and I think I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn these days. I like to spend time with my family and my friends. I think that's really, really important to maintain that social aspect. And a lot of times, this might sound a bit lame, but I just like to think. And,
Nice.
and thinking for me is my kind of meditation. And that's where I come up with things that, you know, I'm always diving into myself as well. So I'm a bit of a sperm whale. Do you know about sperm whales?
Yes, of course. Oh,
So they can dive up to 90 minutes, you know, almost 2 hours. I can't hold my breath for 90 minutes. What are they thinking down there? And they're in the depths of the ocean. It's so dark, it's black. They have to use sonar to try and find everything. So I did kind of pretend like everything's gone black. There's all this water pressure against me. What am I thinking and feeling? There's no distractions now. It's just me in the blackness. And that way I come up with some of the most bizarre things, but that's the way I call it diving into the inner me. And that's the way I can get some peace and calm as well.
Yeah, that's yeah, quite introspective as well. So that's great if you could do that. Okay, my last question. So is there another second act coming? Or is there another
there's many more acts.
Many more acts? Okay.
Yeah, I'm turning 62 in a few days, and I think that I haven't even peaked yet. You know, I'm still thinking that the best time of my life is in front of me. I've always been that way.
Wow.
And I think, you know, the minute I think that my life is kind of peaked and I'm just kind of going downhill now, that I don't work that way at all. I always think that you know, I don't like heights, but I'm a mountain climber emotionally. And I think that there's always a new peak for me to climb, and I'm on a roll. I'm going to keep going. And actually, you know, having people exactly like you from right across the world reach out to connect with me, that tells me that not only what I'm doing is interesting, but I get interested in you and what you're doing. And if I can help you do what you're doing, and you're helping me what I'm doing, that is exactly what we're doing. We're helping everyone think that they too can have a second act.
Thank you so much. I think talking to you was not only talking from an angle of what you know, others are hearing. There were a lot of things that I shared on this show as well. And the thing is that we all need to be in a very balanced state. And to do that, I think we need people like you. You know, this chat with you was something which was in a safe space. It was very comfortable. And I'm sure that you are doing this with so many millions of us. And thank you for bringing that and doing what you're doing, and many more mountains to climb and the oceans to dive, and
Yes.
and many more second acts. So beautiful it is. And thank you, Dr.